words of my mouth and the meditation of my heart be pleasing in your sight, O Lord, my rock and my redeemer. Amen. Please be seated. How do we know when God is calling us and what God is calling us to do? These are important questions to ask ourselves because God calls each and every one of us, first, to have a relationship with God and His Son, Jesus Christ, and to be the best we can be. This involves loving God with all our heart, mind, and soul, essentially putting God first in all our lives, and also loving our neighbor and all creation, and loving ourselves too. Throughout the Bible, there are so many examples of God calling people to do ordinary and extraordinary things. In recent weeks, we have heard about Mary and Joseph, the wise men, Zechariah, Elizabeth, and also John the Baptist. Today, we hear the young Samuel waking in the night while his teacher Eli sleeps nearby in the temple. God keeps calling Samuel, but Samuel doesn't realize it's God who's calling him and thinks it's Eli. He keeps running to Eli, and finally Eli corrects the situation and says to Samuel, the next time God calls, you must respond by saying, "Speak, Lord, your servant is listening." Samuel does so and grows up to be a great prophet over all the land. This reading is really touching because it helps us reflect on our own callings, how to listen to God and to trust and obey. Sometimes we too need an Eli in our lives to help us recognize that God is calling us. This can be, for example, a friend, a teacher, a coach, a relative, a Sunday school teacher, a spiritual director, and even a priest. We can hear God speak to us in prayers, during worship, songs, dreams even, people we meet, events or experiences, or even sitting in nature or sitting on a bus. God is everywhere, and God is in us. As our psalm today says, God knows us intimately, our every thought, our going out and our coming in, our sitting down and our sitting up. God knows us since we were in our mother's womb. How comforting is that? We don't need to explain anything to God. As Grace Church celebrates 150 years, it's inspiring to think and to add up the tens of thousands of people who have been nurtured in building the relationship with God over all these years. And I'm so grateful to be one such person. Thank you to Grace and also my parents, Mary and Peter, and all my family and friends, some of whom are here today, for all their encouragement, and all of you at Grace who have been so kind and welcoming. I'm just so grateful to be able to serve at Grace as interim priest in charge for a few months. It's a way I can give back to Grace, to such a wonderful community. A small thank you. I wanted to share a little of my journey, not to promote myself at all, but to say this is an example of how we can answer God's call. And it's a wonderful exercise for all of us to do. Look back on our lives and think, where was God calling me and how did I respond? And sometimes it's very difficult. In the 1980s, I was blessed to attend university and work part-time as a journalist in Ottawa, where I got involved in the anti-apartheid movement. I was later called to assist the movement in Southern Africa while working as a teacher in rural Zimbabwe. I was then moved to Johannesburg in 1991 during a very violent and volatile time when South Africa was on the edge of catastrophe. Fortunately, all the efforts and sacrifices of millions of people in South Africa and around the world led to the first democratic elections in 1994, and Nelson Mandela was elected as the first president. This was what Archbishop Desmond Tutu called the miracle of the Rainbow Nation. And he called South Africans the Rainbow People of God. I'm so honored that the window up here, dedicated to Archbishop Tutu, is shining God's light and reflecting God's light on all of us here at Grace. And if you haven't seen the window, please have a look after the service. The joy and hope continued after '94 with big events like winning the Rugby World Cup in '95 and the Soccer World Cup, or the African Cup of Nations in '96, and many other events were uniting the country. By this time, I had gotten married in Soweto in 1993, and I had 2 beautiful children. I became a dual citizen and was committed to help build the young democracy through working in educational and health nonprofit organizations. There was so much work to be done to build the country. This was my activist side. On my faith side, while heavily pregnant with my son in 1994, I felt God calling me to visit an Anglican church in the vibrant multicultural neighborhood of Yeoville, where we were living. So the church was just a few blocks away from our home, and I popped in, and I was welcomed by science people Diana and Alan Kirtland, who later became great friends. And I was so taken in with the service, full of singing, full of dancing, marimbas, beautiful music, and drums, and I was hooked. I could see that Christian communities were leading the way in being the Rainbow People of God. So it was a service for everybody. Everyone was welcome, and we were all together as God's people. Both our children were baptized at St. Aidan's, and I helped with Sunday school, flowers, and later reading. And I'm sharing this because we must never underestimate how God works through what you may think is a small gift or ministry. Every effort helps build us up in our faith, not just individually, but as a community, and it all makes a difference. As I became more involved over the years and studied theology, encouraged by my priest, Kathy, I realized that the activist Martha and the religious Martha is one and the same person. Jesus is the ultimate activist, and he is our role model for us as Christians to speak up and to do whatever we can to make the world a better place. In our gospel reading today, Jesus says, "Follow me." And that is all we have to do. Jesus is the example. He is our guide and our inspiration in the good times and the hard times. So it was through this realization I believed that being in full-time ministry, which Bishop Steve of Johannesburg then discerned and sent me to various communities to serve people in various capacities. And I felt that all my life experiences with work, family, and church and community all came together in ministry, and I could have a bigger impact as a church leader. On the one side, everything helped my ministry to challenge and cope with the complexities of centuries of racism, abject poverty, trauma, and grief, but also to celebrate the joys, for example, baptisms, confirmations, marriages, and being part of people's journey to healing, reconciliation, and peace. That was such an honor and a privilege. It is a huge responsibility to be there for people in their most difficult times, but also in their happiest times. But it's an enormous responsibility that I don't take lightly. I'm sharing this because there are so many times in my life when I had to really pray hard, first to hear what God was saying, and then secondly to trust and obey. So you have to wrestle. Sometimes you hear what God is saying, but you don't want to do that. So it's kind of, do you put God first? Of course you do, but maybe it's not what you want to do, and eventually you realize in time that that was the best thing you could have done, was to follow God. So I would like to encourage you to make enough regular time for God, to really listen to God and take advantage of this incredible gift of faith that we have given to us by God freely. We are all called. And it's especially important to listen to God when you are at a crossroads in your life, or you might have a big decision to make. Take time and listen to God and know that God is with you in that decision going forward as you implement that decision. And that grace, and we are all here with you to support you on that journey. You are not alone. So are you ready to say to God, "Speak now, your servant is listening"? The challenge I leave you today is to hear God's call to you, no matter how unexpected or daunting it may be. And I want to leave you with the words from the late Archbishop Oscar Romero. He was assassinated in 1980 for following God's call to stand up against injustice in El Salvador. And in this troubled world we are in, we really do need some words of comfort and encouragement. He said, "A future not our own." It helps now and then to step back and take the long view. The kingdom is not only beyond our efforts, it is beyond our vision. We accomplish in our lifetime only a tiny fraction of the magnificent enterprise that is God's work. Nothing we do is complete, which is another way of saying that the kingdom always lies beyond us. No statement says all that could be said. No prayer fully expresses our faith. No confession brings perfection. No pastoral visit brings wholeness. No program accomplishes the church's mission. No set of goals and objectives includes everything. This is what we are about. We plant seeds that one day will grow. We water seeds already planted, knowing that they hold future promise. We lay foundations that will need further development. We provide yeast that produces effects beyond our capabilities. We cannot do everything, and there is a sense of liberation in realizing that. This enables us to do something and to do it very well. It may be incomplete, but it is a beginning, a step along the way, an opportunity for God's grace to enter and do the rest. We may never see the end results, but that is the difference between the master builder and the worker. We are workers, not master builders, ministers, not messiahs. We are prophets of a future not our own. Amen.